In this bulletin, case continues to rise in the Central Division. USB halls shut down. And price hike affects Tavua residents. Good afternoon. There are 11 more COVID-19 cases recorded, with 10 being from a household in Kinoya. This takes to 21 infections for yesterday. The Kinoya cases are linked to the extra supermarket cluster. The other patient, an employee for FICAC, is a work contact of case 206 from the Samambula cluster. Permanent Secretary for Health Dr. James Fong says contact tracing investigations are ongoing and the public should expect to see his teams on the ground conducting these investigations throughout Suva. The ministry says 12 patients have recovered, which means there are now 108 active cases in isolation. Results have also been received from the remaining 4,000 of the 11,000 total backlogged samples that were sent to 2 private laboratories in Melbourne, Australia for testing. There are 0 positive results reported from these samples. 92,821 COVID-19 laboratory tests have been conducted since the ministry started testing in early 2020. A total of 2,496 samples were tested yesterday. There has been significant amount of help from all government ministries as well as from ordinary Fijians as vaccination drives continue. Head of Fiji's Vaccine Task Force, Dr. Rachel Devi, says in light of restrictions, the Ministry of Health is working to ensure they get as many people vaccinated. Dr. Devi says many are assisting the teams as they continue to roll out the first and second dose of the vaccine in parts of the Central and Western Division. She says this time around, vaccination teams have been very cautious because of the containment areas and the increase in the number of COVID-19 cases. Dr. Devi adds that the ultimate aim is for every vaccine drive to be a COVID-safe space as well.
It's coming forth and helping us, and especially with crowd control, that's been really helpful. It's really nice to see people do the necessary do's, like getting their masks, and where they can, they have hand sanitizers that bring them along, or wash their hands on site or whatsoever.
Residents living in non-containment areas in Tavua are experiencing increase in prices on basic necessities. People are spending $4 more on items and groceries. Unaisimba Kewa says they have not been directly impacted by the virus, but she feels that shop owners are taking advantage of the situation.
We have noticed price increase on a lot of items here in Tavua. Some shops are selling 4.5 kg gas cylinders at $14 to $15 recently. Before we just bought them for $11 to $12.
The University of the South Pacific student residential halls in Suva is currently on lockdown as the Ministry of Health swabs and tests some students. These students who reside at the 11th hall have been identified to be contacts of a secondary contact of a suspected COVID-19 case. Some students living on campus told FBC News that movement within campus is strictly not allowed. All students have been advised to stay in their rooms and self-isolate if they have come into contact with the 11th hall students or otherwise contact the Ministry of Health. The Australian government has provided Australian $20 million worth of personal protective equipment to Fiji. Australian High Commissioner to Fiji, John Fick, says this assistance is part of the Australian bilateral support to Fiji in response to COVID-19. He says the aid is also aimed to cover the buying of lab equipment and testing machines.
We've provided $104 million. That consists of budget support directly to the government, COVID support as well, PPE gear, lab technicians, lab equipment.
Agriculture export has gone up in the past 6 years, and this can be affected if inorganic fertilizers are stopped without properly substituting it. Minister for Agriculture Dr. Mahendra Reddy says these inorganic fertilizers not only affects the environment but also the preservation of our flora and fauna. He says the Agriculture Ministry is working with relevant stakeholders to find solution by bringing in organic fertilizers.
Both the ministries are working together to see how we can reduce the utilization of inorganic fertilizer and substitute it with organic fertilizer without compromising on our quest to increase agricultural output.
Village headman of Narata village in Nandranga is pleased with the show of Fijian spirit and unity among villages in these times of uncertainty. Turangani Koro Autiko Kuri Dhuva says they've imposed a total lockdown in the community and they will not receive any visitors until further notice. Chasana Nunga has more.
With lockdown in place for Narata village, a COVID-19 community response team was established to monitor movement among villages. Kuriduba says the support shown by these villages towards this measure deserves commendation.
I would say this pandemic has strengthened our community spirit and the bond we share. Now with our response team manning checkpoints, we see villagers visiting them with a hot cuppa, meals and other essentials. I've told the villagers to avoid unnecessary movement and remain within the village boundaries.
From Narata to Nawamangi village, both neighboring villages have imposed stringent lockdown measures despite being in a non-containment zone.
Village elders have agreed to restrict unnecessary movement in the village. Children under the age of 18 must remain indoors at all times. We will continue to show our support in our quest to contain the spread of COVID-19.
Meanwhile, one of the 5 Nawamangi villages have completed her self-isolation period. These are villages who had traveled from Lautoka and the Suva containment areas during the 2-day travel window earlier. Chosei Nanunga, FBC News.
And top 2 netters to play in elite competition. Welcome back. Flying Fijian lock Temo Mayana Vanua is one of the many overseas based that takes pride in representing Fiji.
Every child that grows up in Fiji, who once had that dream of wearing that white jersey, that dream is still alive in me, and I always tell myself I'll keep representing my country until my body gives up.
2 national netters will get a chance to compete in elite level competition in Australia through the Pacific Oz Sports Program. Netball Fiji President Rubian Sorovaki says this is part of the 3-year agreement that Australia has embarked on. She says this will be a huge stepping stone for the national netters who are looking to make their big break.
We've also been able to secure spots for 2 of our national athletes to travel to Australia and be part of the Player Immersion Program funding. So if all goes well, we should have 2 athletes heading off to Australia to play in the Sapphire Series.
Fiji Association of Sports and National Olympic Committee has issued an advisory to sporting federations to keep in constant contact with their athletes and members. Chief Executive Officer Lorraine Ma says these are unusual times that no one had really prepared for. She says sports in Fiji needs to continue to stay alive and each federation needs to play its part in ensuring consistency and communication.
I do feel for our national federations having to go through this again, but I think all of them would realize that the importance of refraining at this time, unless you have the right platforms from conducting their sport.
After just 2 rounds of the Trans-Tasman Super Rugby competition, it has the wobbles. 10 games have been played without a win for the Australians with blowout scorelines. Taking a look at the weather, a high-pressure system to the far southwest of Fiji is expected to generate and direct heavy to damaging southerly swells over the southern waters and coastal areas of the country. That's FBC News Now. Join us for our 1-hour major bulletin at 7 p.m. And be sure to download the FBC app to access the latest in news, sports, and live radio broadcasts from any of our 6 FBC radio stations. Stay safe and good afternoon.